So yeah, Athos is not afraid of cucumber. He attacks cucumber. Welcome to the center of the world, presented by Antoine Hlavaty. Hi everybody, welcome to the center of the world, presented by Antoine Hlavaty, and tonight I will introduce you to my guest, Katie Theel.
Hello.
Hello, Katie. Tonight we're gonna talk about life, mainly, about movies, mostly, about teaching, I guess, and maybe we will talk about other things as well, we will see. So tonight is a really special night because today was Women's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So when you will listen to that, obviously it will be past, but when we're recording, it was something like, I guess that is never been so actual after all that time.
Yep.
So what was in Brussels?
There was a big march, which was really interesting. I came out of the Museum of Musical Instruments, and it was passing, so I jumped in. And everything was in...
So, that is my cat that I think dropped a cucumber on the floor.
Yep, that's what it was. Cats are supposed to be afraid of cucumbers, aren't they?
So yeah, Athos is not afraid of cucumber. He attacks cucumber. Okay. So you just joined the parade?
Yeah, and it was, similar to the Women's March that I went to in LA, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, but in French, so I didn't know what was happening.
Okay.
But it was interesting because there wasn't a lot of central organization, I guess. It went kind of into the main, I don't know what that plaza is called, but when you're just getting into the main area going towards Grand Place. And we walked from the museum towards Grand Place in the red and green like tents are. Yeah, that's where it stopped. And it was kind of spread out through there, and there was a stage, and there were when I first got there, there were women singing that song that originated in Chile in the end of last year, where the women all started spontaneously singing this song. I mean, I guess it wasn't spontaneous, it was coordinated, but at their protest there. And since then it's been translated into all these different languages and stuff. So there was these women on a stage, and they did that in Spanish and then in French. But then as I was leaving that, things kind of got a little bit chaotic very quickly, which I wasn't expecting. Like there was one woman being dragged by police from some other area, that like tunnel that has the Smurfs on the roof. And she was yelling at them, and then all these people clustered around and started yelling at the police, and then this guy came up and started pushing the police, and the cops were being very aggressive. And then eventually they let her go, and then I walked a little ways further down, and for like no reason at all, these men started picking up traffic barricades and like throwing them into the street, and then they tried to throw one of those Uber bikes, but another man was like, no, and grabbed the bike, and then these other guys pushed him to the ground.
Whoa.
It was like a lot of what was supposed to be a march for women felt like it was just a lot of men using the crowds as an excuse to be aggressive, which was very ironic. Just the irony was so great, and it was like, there were the men that were there in the marching portion that were kind of intended to be there. Like they had the signs and they were being allies, and it was all good. And then I feel like once the protest landed in the square, there were men that just kind of joined in and used it as a cover more so than actually being there for the Women's Day part of it. And it felt like, yes, this is why Women's Day needs to happen. This is why these marches are happening, is for this type of behavior. So
that literally happens on the only Women's Day.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was like the women were loud, the women were angry, but they weren't like starting shit in that physical sort of way that the men were, and that was very interesting to me.
It is like probably the most, I would say, opposite thing that should happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like there is such little respect.
Yeah.
That the guys are even doing the opposite of what they should do on that day.
I was just surprised, especially because it was, there were a lot of people, but not so many people. And Belgium is the place that you think of as being, more peaceful.
Indeed.
And I was very surprised that it escalated so quickly.
Indeed.
For no reason.
So it's kind of interesting what you're saying, because I literally had probably the most different experience from yours at a protest, because I was actually on Friday. Mm-hmm. On the last Friday, it was the 5th of March or 6th of March, something 6th. Like that. The Friday something. That they do those Friday protests for the environment.
That was new to me. I don't know that they do that every Friday.
So it's Fridays for Future, yeah. And it's led by that Greta Thunberg. She's from Sweden. I guess that she represents more than she wants to represent. Mm-hmm. In a sense that when you see her in real life, you totally see that she's just a teenage girl that, she would like to care about other stuff. But that for some reason, she feel invested in that. Mm-hmm. So I saw the girl. I was standing really next to her for a good 5-10 minutes before the march started. Mm-hmm. I took those portraits that you saw. That was my experience, that she was, she's not craving for the fame at all. Just to go back to that experience of the protest itself, people were so peaceful and so positive. That was different. And yeah, it was so beautiful. And it was for something that is finally could look chaotic, because environment, mm-hmm. What a big topic. But for something really, really chaotic, and they had something really logical. And it brought me to that thing that Greta said during her speech, that we are the generation of science. Mm-hmm. And that we must use science to prove what we're saying, and that we must believe in science and do what it takes scientifically to improve tomorrow.
Yeah, and I do think that's something that the younger people and the people of our generation are more prepared to listen to. But that also might just be that those are the types of people that I hang out with. But and it might also be an age thing, that we're not yet old enough to have sold out, maybe, in the way that a lot of politicians and people of power like that have. That maybe it's just that we're still young and willing to fight for good, or maybe it's that we're more logical and willing to listen to the science behind things like that.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so Women's Day, protest. But let's get back to the beginning. Hello, Katie. So how are you?
I'm good.
Nice. So hello everyone again. I guess I skipped. It was like an introduction. It was like a warm up. So I'm with Katie. I'm hosting her tonight, last night as well, mm-hmm. and the night before. Mm-hmm. So it's like the third night.
Yeah.
First couchsurfing experience.
Yeah. Nice. First time.
There we go. How do you find it? How do you like it?
I like it. It's interesting. It's just a different way to travel, especially because I came here this weekend alone, and so traveling alone, you either meet people or you don't. And it was kind of cool to get to meet someone 20 minutes after I got to Brussels.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's one of the wonderful reasons, I guess, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's a better way to travel with couchsurfing than for example, hostels. Just for the experience to meet the real people.
Yeah.
Anyways, now you're living in
Madrid.
What are you doing in Madrid?
I'm an assistant English teacher in a primary school, mostly with infantil, which is 3 and 4-year-olds, and then I have a couple classes of 5-year-olds, one class of 5th grade, and a few classes of 6th grade. But I have 21 periods a week, and 15 of my periods are with kids between age 3 and 5. So mostly infantil, which has been really interesting.
My first thought is, how do you survive?
Well, I've been sick since I started working there, more or less. I'm not sick right now because the infantil English teacher was absent last week, so I didn't see them for a week, and that's the only reason that I'm not sick right now. They're very germy. One of my first weeks there, probably, and I started in January, not in the beginning of the school year, so it was like the height of cold and flu season, probably, and one of my first weeks, there was a kid who looked at me, and he had just this fat snot hanging out of his nose, and I was about to tell him to go blow his nose, and then it just fell onto the floor. And I almost threw up. So, that is my life as an infantil
Welcome
teacher.
to Spain! I'm joking.
That, and when a girl came to get me, and they only really speak Spanish, but they also speak Spanish in the way that, infants talk, where it doesn't really make sense, even if you know the language, So I half understand them. And a girl came to get me once to tell me that another girl was, whatever, having some sort of problem. So I went to see what it was, and the problem was that she couldn't poop. So, And I was like, okay. This is a problem for your actual teacher, not for me. I'm not dealing with this. So, yeah. Okay. But they're so cute. I love.
So for the 1 day and a half that you spend per week there, because the rest of the time you're sick.
Yeah.
They're cute.
They're so cute, and the great thing about infantil is that compared to 6th grade, for example, 6th grade, I think I'm at a place now where they respect me a little bit more, but especially in the beginning, it was they weren't disrespectful, but they didn't treat me like I was their teacher, which I'm not. But if their teacher.
So what are you?
I'm an assistant teacher, so it's a bilingual school. So they have half their periods in English, and I just come in as support because their English teachers are all not native English speakers, and they have they have thick accents, and their English isn't always perfect, and so I kind of work with them, and especially with the 6th graders, they're preparing to take this big nationwide English test that they have to take in 6th grade, and so it's a lot of me helping to tune up their English as a native speaker.
Oh.
But so I'm not their teacher. I'm always there with their main teacher, but sometimes the main teacher will step out or whatever, and it's the 6th graders will get rowdy then because they know I don't actually have that much control or whatever. The infantil, they don't know the difference between me and their regular teacher.
Oh.
They treat me with the same respect as they treat their normal teacher, which is sometimes none, but sometimes a lot, but it's either way, it's they treat me like I'm actually a figure of authority, and that's nice.
So are you feeling do you feel that Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was the cop in the preschool?
Yeah, it's a lot of literally picking them up into the air and taking them to where they have to be and setting them down, or just grabbing their arm and pulling them over to a chair and being like, sit down. It's just, and they're like, oh, okay. Or it's funny when they say things to me like, so often I don't understand them, and it's partly because my Spanish is not perfect, and it's partly because they don't make any sense when they talk. But I've learned that like they say things, and I just go like, oh, cool, and then like they're happy and they walk away. And I don't think that I gave the appropriate response to what they were saying at all. But they just want like an adult to listen to them for a second. And then I'll be like, oh, okay. And then they are thrilled, you know?
That's
so
good.
they're very simple and they're very cute, and they all attack me with hugs every time I come in. Go, Teacher Katie! And, you know, wrap themselves around my legs, and I love that. My 6th graders don't do that.
So you're working in Spain?
Yeah.
You're not from Spain?
No. From the United States, in Spain, from the end of December until June or July or something.
Okay, wow. Where are you from exactly?
I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I have been living in LA since fall of 2014 until I came to Madrid.
Oh, 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, when was it exactly that you moved to LA?
Well, I moved for college, so it was like August of 2014.
Whoa. Do you think like it's a life place where you belong or something like that?
I don't know yet, and I have never known. I think for a long time I just felt like definitely not. It was not someplace that I was going to be for my whole life. And then more recently I felt like, well, I don't know, maybe, but still probably not. And then I think after coming to Spain, it's, you know, the first time that I've been out of LA for any extended amount of time since I moved there. And I'm thinking about it differently since being gone. And I feel like maybe I could be there forever. We'll see. And it's also now that I'm out of college and have been out of college for a bit, you start actually making a real home in a place instead of a temporary home. And, you know, I live in the neighborhood that I like, and I have friends there, and I've gotten used to the grocery stores and the restaurants, and like it feels more like I am a real person living in LA instead of someone that's going to school in LA. And I think I've realized that it would also be harder to move now. You know, it's like once you leave college, if you leave a place, it's nothing, I think. But once you've started a life somewhere, you have more to leave.
Yeah, that's something that I can totally understand.
Yeah.
I feel you in the sense that I did my master degree and I started to work in Quebec City. Mm-hmm. And I lived there for 8 years in the end. So
yeah.
Now I'm in Brussels, new adventure. Do you think that there is something like a LA style? You know, like, because I feel like as a foreigner, as someone from Europe that has grown in some, let's say, more European culture, we have that idea that LA is such a nice city to visit and stuff like that. But actually, it's not that much a touristic city. There is not much to sightsee. And still I hear a lot of people saying, but LA is so amazing. And I feel it's more the lifestyle that in the let's say the touristic stuff or the sightseeing or whatever. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that I realized quickly when moving there, or I guess I realized it slowly, but the first thing that hit me was I came to LA on a trip in high school, and it was so not what I expected. It was very dirty, and we went to a lot of the typical places that you think you go in LA, you know, Hollywood and Santa Monica, and it was also gross.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit disappointed because by that point I already knew that I was going to be, you know, trying to work there because I work in the film industry, and I sort of knew already at that point that was what I was aiming for. And I was like, oh, well, shit, I don't want to move here. But after I had been there for a while, I realized that there's really, really cool stuff to see and do in LA, but it's not the touristy stuff. And I think a lot of cities, like San Francisco, for example, I love. And if you go to San Francisco and you only do the touristy things, you're still gonna enjoy it. But LA, like you don't, the touristy things are just not worth doing. Like I've lived there for several years now, and like I avoid going to Hollywood at all costs. But there are other places and other things that if you know someone who is a local, they can show you, and it's actually a really cool place.
So here is the thing. That experience you say about you going there with, was it with your class or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had it like last year when I went with my dad, so totally different age and stuff, but I was going for the touristy stuff at first. And what saved my experience of Los Angeles was couchsurfing, because I had that host that lives there for years. I had the opportunity to sightsee the cool stuff.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference, I think, in that city, like more than most cities. Yeah.
I went to the Marilyn Monroe tombstone, and this is something like which is so not famous. You know, it's not even a tomb. It's like that kind of stuff on a wall where you put the body in it. You know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
And it's written Norma Jean on it.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's literally in the middle of buildings, of residential and office buildings. So it's not a place that you can find like easily. But when you go there and you experience that kind of darker LA, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and I didn't even know. I'm looking at it online. I didn't even know that it was there. I thought that Marilyn Monroe was buried in Hollywood Forever, which is kind of the famous cemetery there. But she's just in like a random place.
Yeah. So I went to Hollywood Boulevard as well.
It's just homeless people and people trying to give you their mixtape. That's
it. And people dressed up that wants to take a picture for money.
And I think it's like I had the same experience when I went to New York City, also in high school, and going to Times Square. It was like you hear all these things about Times Square, and then I got there and same thing. It was gross. It was all people in costumes, and I think we did take a picture with one of them, and he like said some weird stuff to me and my friends while we were there in the picture. Like, it's just creepy people in weird costumes. Everything's dirty. Like, it's the same kind of thing. And I think that's how the Hollywood Walk of Fame is to me. I finally took my mom there. She kept asking to go to Hollywood, and I kept telling her, I'm not taking you to Hollywood. And finally, when she came for my college graduation, we went. And she liked it, which is the crazy part.
Oh gosh. So I had a different experience about New York. Maybe I'll talk about it one day, but I'm really sorry about your New York Keys experience, because I think it can be better sometimes.
Well, I liked New York overall, but the Times Square part specifically, it's like that's what you hear, like that's like synonymous with New York. It's like Times Square, and then that part of it was really a letdown, I thought. Yeah,
well, I was there in 2010, so it's like fucking long time ago. And at that time, it was really more like showy. You know, like super clean and...
Really? Because I was there in probably 2012, I would say.
Yeah, it was like really, really clean. Lot of entertainment. Like, I mainly remember the shops open all the time. And I remember the kind of tourists that were there. It was December. It was before Christmas. So I do think that, you know, you can have that good experience of New York. You know, you must not stay on that experience that, oh, this is New York.
Yeah, and I liked other parts of New York, and I've been meaning to go back there. And now I have friends who live there, so I would get a more authentic experience of it.
Anyway,
sure.
okay. We are derailing. I'm derailing that podcast. We need to get back on our topic. So you're in LA. You're in LA, and in LA there is a lifestyle.
Yeah, I would say so. I think, I mean, there's sort of a dichotomy of the lifestyle of LA, maybe, where, I mean, a lot of people talk about it being very superficial, and I think in some sense it is, largely because there are a lot of people there that are actors, or they want to be actors, or even outside the film industry, there's just a lot of wealth in LA. There are people who drive really fancy cars and have really big houses, and they work in banking or in startups or like whatever. There's a lot of money. And the further west you go, the more superficial it gets, where it's more expensive shops and more people with plastic surgery and more people trying to be influencers. I live on the east side, and the east side there's a lot less of that. And I think on the east side, there's a lot more of people who are just very expressive. It's a much more expressive place. And I think like the biggest difference that I have noticed culturally coming from Wisconsin is just the difference in ambition. And I think there's a good and a bad side to that, where like the Midwest is very much like people do something and that's that, and they're happy with it. People like you're not striving to climb the ladder necessarily as much in the Midwest. It's very working class, and so people might be you might be a plumber and be totally happy with that. And I think most people look for things to fulfill them outside of their work, and it's largely in the family or things like that. And in LA, I think there's a lot of ambition, and people want to be the best at whatever they are, and people have dreams where they're not happy being a plumber, they want to be an actor or whatever. Everyone's trying to do something that's more unique and risky. And I think that there's a lot of good in being ambitious and wanting to be the best that you can be at something. But I think there's also a lot of good in the more Midwestern idea of being content with where you're at. And I'm sort of trying to figure out how to straddle those two things, I think. But I think that ambition is a big part of the true LA lifestyle, besides just, what people say about it being superficial or whatever. I had a friend that came to visit me, and he really summed it up well, that he was like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, everybody here wants to be something. Like, you go into a coffee shop and they want to be something else. They're trying to be actors or screenwriters or whatever, and they're just working in a coffee shop for now. And I think that there's something that's, it's a little sad in some ways and a little bit like cool and inspiring in other ways. So to me, that as somebody that lives there, I think that that's the biggest part of the culture. But there's a lot of stuff that you might see on the outside, like the fashion or the, tan skin and everyone trying to be an influencer or whatever, that you might say is also the LA culture in a different sense. And the food. I think the food's a part of the LA culture as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like me some good food.
Honestly, I didn't think that I was a huge food person, but that is the thing that I have missed most being in Madrid, is the food in LA. It's unbeatable.
Yeah, I know. I experienced that. Katie, you live in LA.
Yes.
And you said, if I heard well, that you were working in the cinemas?
Uh-huh.
So what are you doing in LA?
I am a freelancer. I'm a freelance production designer and general art department gal. I have mostly been working as a designer, but also sometimes work as an art director or a set decorator. Or recently I had a job as a props PA on a TV show. So really anything within the art department, but I mostly design, and I ultimately want to design. And
so what are like the biggest things that you worked on so far?
It's interesting starting versus being established and being non-union versus union, it changes a lot of things. But I have so far, I was a props PA on The Goldbergs, which was an ABC/Hulu show.
I heard.
And also on Schooled, which is the spin-off show of The Goldbergs. So I was there for part of the last 2 seasons. And then I was the art director on a music video for the reggaeton star Farruko, and the art director...
Okay, so is it something that we can see on YouTube or whatever?
Yeah. It's not something I'm proud of. It's a very classic...
You know that we're gonna watch it, right?
It's a very classic hip-hop reggaeton kind of video. It's a car wash, and it's a lot of women wearing no clothes, you know, being very heavily objectified. It was kind of a crazy experience. My friend Noelle designed it, and she is a year younger than me, or a year behind me in school, I should say. And so she was still in school and had just cold emailed some producers and said, hey, I want to do more art department work. Let me know if you have anything. And on a Friday, she got an email from this producer saying, yeah, we're shooting a music video on Monday, and we don't have a designer, which is insane, first of all. But whatever. And then everything closes on the weekends, like rental houses and stuff. So we had no time to get anything. And she called me and said, hey, I'm doing this music video. They didn't really give me any money for a crew, but would you do me a favor and do this for free for me as my art director?
Oh, for free?
Yeah, and she had done free work for me when we were in school. Like, she worked on, it was more, you know, acceptable, whatever, but she had done student projects for me outside of class. And so I said, yeah, okay, sure.
And is it the kind of things that increase your rep?
Well, so... we didn't realize what this was. So she says, hey, I'm doing this music video. They're not paying me well. They're not paying you anything. And I'm thinking it's a music video. Okay, it's going to be somebody's brother is in a band or whatever. Because you get a lot of that kind of stuff. And it's when you're starting out, like, that's fine. Especially if it's...
What's the name of the guy?
Farruko.
What's the name of the song?
Coolant.
Coolant. Oh yeah. Okay. Ooh, that's my boy. That's my. Oh, that's a sweet baby.
Oh, he has a crazy look, and I actually do like his music now that I'm living in Spain. I've listened to him more. Okay, let me back up in my story because the entire thing is so wild. So we assume that we're coming and doing this music video for some unknown person because they're not paying us anything, and that's what that is reflective of usually. And we go to this car wash where they're shooting, and there's a Hispanic girl working, or Latina, whatever, girl working behind the counter, and they were just opening it up for us, and then they were gonna leave. And she was like, so who's this music video for? And I didn't even know. And Noelle, who's the designer, was like, I think his name's Farruko. And the woman was like, oh my god, like, Farruko? And we were like, yeah, yes. And so we quick go in the corner and, like, Google him. And he has all these Latin Grammys, like, he's a huge star. And we were like, wait, what? And they, you know, so they're paying us nothing. And that was the first, immediately we were like, okay, so we're getting scammed here. And it's all the entire...
So it's like some guys goes to, let's say, he is working like outside of the US, and someone says, oh, we are making a video for Bon Jovi, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he's huge. He's a Puerto Rican star, but like all over Latin America and in Spain, he's like topping the charts. And we had no idea. And she didn't know, she was still in school. She should have Googled his name right away when they sent it to her, and as soon as she saw how big he was, asked for more money. But we just assumed it was nobody, and everybody on this crew is like either black or Latino, like buff, tatted up dudes in ponytails, pretty much. And then it's me and her in the art department and this other Asian girl who's also like 21 years old. And we're like, hey, everybody.
Hi, everyone. This is Katie.
And he like shows up late in this big trailer and his manager starts fighting with the director. It was like a very classic like big music video thing. And he seemed nice himself. He didn't really speak English as far as I could tell and was pretty quiet. But
okay,
like his manager was a lot.
So should we watch the entire thing?
Well, so the big thing, so like here in this beginning part, our job, again, remember we had no time to prep this. Nothing is open. But they said we want this car wash to be like a beach. So we just brought in all these beach chairs and pool floaties and stuff like that. And their big thing was that they wanted sand all over the place. So we had literal tons of sand. Like we bought bags and bags and bags of sand and we spread it all under where they're sitting. And then later there's another bit and it's all under there. And you barely see it at all. They cut it out of almost every single shot. And when you do see it, it's like for a second.
Oh yeah, you can. You can't really see that.
No. But they were like so insistent and dumping tons of sand into a parking lot and then trying to clean it up is not easy or fun.
Oh, that's the start of the music now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's listen to that stuff. Wow.
And I did ultimately end up getting paid a tiny bit, but not very much.
So you made a music video that has almost 65 million views on YouTube.
Yeah.
Congratulations! I think I will insert some woohoo!
It's just, it hurts me so much that is the thing that by far the most people have seen that I've worked on because I hate it. But, you know, that's fine.
Which is kind of insane story when you think about it.
Yeah, it's all insane.
Do you have like good outcomes out of that?
It was a funny story. That's about it. And I think for definitely for Noelle, and I think to a lesser extent for me as well, it was just a learning experience in not getting screwed in that type of situation. And I've had a lot of those since working as a freelancer. I think coming out of school, the design stuff, I was, you know, as prepared as I expected to be when graduating college, but the self-managing part...
Ooh, that's a lot of work.
That's been hard. And bringing it back to the Women's March, there's a lot of inherent sexism in the film industry, in the ways that people know, like Harvey Weinstein, whatever, but the way that it plays out mostly is just things like, for example, the art department and hair and makeup and wardrobe are the departments that are typically female, and like camera and lighting and stuff is typically male. And the difference in what those jobs are offered for pay and resources is huge. And I really think that a lot of it has to do with it being men versus women. And so I'm learning to stick up for myself more and say, no, this is the rate that I want. This is the crew that I want, you know, whatever. This is the budget that I want, and sticking to it more. And I think that it's paying off, but there's a lot of, you know, in some of the first jobs that I would do, I would show up and find out after the fact that the cinematographer was getting paid 3 times as much as me, and our jobs are supposed to be equal. We're both department heads. And I think that a lot of that really does come from the traditional man versus woman thing. Just like how teachers are often paid less because teachers are always paid less because teaching is a historically female profession. It's that same sort of thing, but just within the film industry itself. And so there's a big learning curve. And that video was a great example of being like, okay, so because we were young, and also perhaps because we were women... You're promoting
the opposite of that in some way. Because this thing has, in the end, 65 million views.
Yeah.
That must be some burden.
Yeah, I mean,
But
that was a bummer.
but can you distance yourself from it now?
Well, that's the only thing that I've worked on that the content has been something I really didn't like. But it's even more than that, like that the micro how it played out in my own life, which was like I made $150 for something that made 64 million views. Like that's a huge bump for Farruko. Like he got money off of that and his team got money off of that, but I got $150.
Just didn't Google the guy.
Yeah.
That's so. Next time, Google the guy.
Yeah, well, then in that case in particular, I didn't even know. Like, I wasn't the department head. I was just showing up to help my friend, and so I didn't know his name before the day of, you know. So it was a little bit less of. There wasn't as much that I could do in that situation, but yeah, no, it's just asking for what you deserve and knowing what that is and how to navigate that environment, which I think is just that much harder when you're a woman. When women ask for what they want, it's often doesn't go over as well.
that thing about like the difference between men and women,
mm-hmm.
it's so shocking, because you feel like that Weinstein-y thing, you feel like it gives a kick in the balls of the entire system.
Mm-hmm.
But then you realize that no, it's literally like even the foundation of the system are like that.
Yeah, it's just ingrained in the system, and so it's the type of thing. I feel like in the US, the main form of sexism is intrinsic. Like I don't think that we're in a climate in the US in a time period where there are very many people being overtly sexist. I think that it's just these things that are built into the system where nobody would ever say or like acknowledge even to themselves like, oh yeah, I'm paying you less because you're a woman. It's just that these are things that they don't even think about because it's how things have worked. Like I don't produce, and so I don't really know what their thought process is, but it's whatever makes you go, yeah, the production designer makes less than the cinematographer. And it's not because the production designer is a woman, like you're not thinking that, but that is the subtext, you know? And it's just because that's how that has worked for so long.
Okay, so to change the things, it would take then more men as set designer,
mm-hmm.
for example, and more women as, let's say, cinematographer?
Yeah, I think that is one big thing is just getting more. I think getting women in the non-traditionally women departments, like getting more female cinematographers and female gaffers and female directors and producers is really a huge
in
push.
Canada I was in that movie set for a really good movie, by the way, if you're interested in some French Canadian movie.
Mm-hmm.
In French Canadian it's called Embrasse-moi comme tu m'aimes, which means kiss me as you love me or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that on the set there were half production assistant that were guy and half that were girls.
Mm-hmm.
So at least they are like toward the future.
Mm-hmm.
There is some tries to do that.
Yeah.
It was in 2015.
It's just and there are amazing cinematographers that are women that are working, and I was just telling you about my roommate who's I think the best cinematographer that I know, or my old roommate, who's a woman, and they're out there, and I think that they also bring something very unique to the way that the movie is looking, because the cameras, that's what gives your movie the perspective that it has, you know. My job is very important and I will defend it forever, but like in terms of the being the lens of the characters or being, you know, the point of view of the whole thing, we've been talking more, I think, lately about like the male gaze and what that is and how that applies to media and maybe how we can bring in this female gaze. And I think that
can you explain what is it?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard to explain, and I don't know if I'm the best person to do it. It's just, I think that the way that it manifests in film, to me, is if you think about the camera as an eye, It's focusing on things, it's paying attention to certain things in certain moments. And I think as humans, the way that women literally see the world compared to men is at times very different. I think we focus on different things. Like, the best example that I can give is, for me, like, thinking about walking to your car in a parking garage at night. A man is probably just going to walk to his car, and that's kind of all there is to it. And a woman will be looking around, looking over her shoulder, maybe her keys are in her hand, ready to punch someone, whatever. It's this sense of perceiving the world differently and focusing on these little elements. And I think if the camera can do that, it's a different perspective to your movie.
Yeah. Man, that's fucked up. we are in 2020 and these kind of things still happen.
Yeah, well, not necessarily all the time, but in certain times, there are a lot of reasons, in my opinion, that males are more inclined towards violence or predatory action. And it can be rape, it can be sexual assault that isn't rape, it can be mugging or stealing or whatever, but it's most often going to be men against women. And
yeah.
And because a man doesn't know if another man can beat him up or not, but a man will assume that most women can't. And I think most women maybe will assume that they can't. And it's usually true. And I don't like to say that, and I like to think that I'm strong and that I could take someone if I had to, but like, it's just the truth, physically, and it's a shame for the world. Yeah, and I think like I was reading recently about the hashtag Yes All Women movement that was from several years back.
What is it, that movement?
I forget what the kind of inciting incident of it was, but it was just there was some case of rape, I believe. This was maybe 2012 or 13. There was some incident that kicked it off, and then all over Twitter there was this hashtag Yes All Women, and kind of the gist of it was that a lot of times in conversations you'll say, oh, and men are like this, whatever, and some men will say, well, not all men are like that, and it's true. It's 100% true. Not all men are like that. Not all men are bad guys. Most of them aren't. But the hashtag Yes All Women was kind of, no, not all men are like that, but because some are, yes, all women need to be on the alert for that, Like, all women feel this fear because some men are bad.
But when, there is that rule that women should be afraid for men for this and this reason, isn't it like the opposite of what it should do?
Well, I don't think anyone's saying women should be afraid. It's more that women have to be alert.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you say.
But I think, when it gets fucked up is when, there have been instances that I've heard about of college campus sexual assault training or workplace sexual assault training where they teach, well, women, here's how you should protect yourself. Like, be home, don't walk on streets that might be, where you might be alone. Try to be home by this time at night, whatever. Teaching the women, don't do this, don't drink too much at a party, whatever. When they should be saying, hey, men, don't behave this way. Like, yeah. If a woman's walking on the street alone at night, leave her alone. Or if she drinks too much at a party, help her get home safely or whatever, And so it's teaching us how to get home and lock ourselves into our little cages instead of teaching, the other side.
Okay, and now we are entering in the deep depth of the subject, which is let's fight the rape culture. That's really interesting, all that topic right now, because today was Women's Day, was not respected at all, really chaotic, and that's like heartbreaking to hear that. And we have that story of a daily society stuff that there is like this kind of stuff happening. So I get my my fist clenched, holding up in the air for the girls and the women's and the sisters and the mothers and the grandmothers and whatever. Yeah, all of them. I mean, they deserve that. We stand for them. Anyway, we were talking about that Farruko. So what other projects you worked on? Like you said about that Goldberg thingy things.
Yeah, the Goldbergs, so it's the most, well-known things that I've worked on are not necessarily the things I've worked on that I've been the most excited about or proud of or anything. But the Goldbergs was cool because thus far, it's the only, like, big show and big production that I've worked on. That was my job right before I came to Spain. So I was the props production assistant on the two shows. I worked at Sony. We shot on the Sony lot. And so that was really cool to, we're working with big actors. The Goldbergs is in its 7th season and Schooled is in its 2nd season. And
who are the guys on that TV show?
Well, the 3, I guess, that are sort of well known outside of the show are Jeff Garlin is the dad. He's from Curb Your Enthusiasm, and he's a comedy guy. You would definitely recognize him. So Jeff Garlin is the dad. Wendy, I don't actually know what her last name is, but Wendy something is the mom, and she's in Bridesmaids and a bunch of other things. And then the grandpa is George Segal, who's, a classic old-timey actor. And the cast is all really nice, which is great because I think on big shows you never...
Man, the guy is 86.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, he has a massage table on set, and he only eats sandwiches from a certain deli. And he gets driven around in his golf cart. He's really nice, but it's just
you don't want him to die on the show.
Yeah, he's just an old man.
Why do we do that? Why? Shouldn't... we should let them go. So you're working on the Goldbergs.
Yeah.
And what do you do exactly on the set there?
So I was props production assistant. A production assistant is, they have them in several different departments. It's kind of what it sounds like. You're just an assistant. You're kind of the lowest position. And on anything big, like studio movies and TV shows like that, production assistant is the only job that you can have before you are in a union. And getting into the union is a long and complicated process that takes many years. So you can only be a PA. I was PA for props department, so it was a lot of financial paperwork, doing some of their finances, like keeping track of how much we were spending on every episode within the props department, which is, on a big show like that, props is separate from the art department, but they work very much hand in hand. So props department has its own budget, and I was keeping track of that and running things up and down from our offices to the stages and back, and then also sometimes getting to help with making certain things or doing, little craft projects that would end up being in the show. One day we spent a bunch of time making hand turkeys that were gonna go up on the wall because our set is a school. So those things where, you trace your hand and then put little feathers on it and it's a turkey. It's a Thanksgiving craft that they do in schools. So I did a lot of those, or anything the main thing that they would give to me is anything that had to be done in huge quantities. I stuffed 500 cards and baseball cards into little protective sleeves because they needed to be in sleeves for the script. Or I made all of these fan signs for a wrestling match between Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. So we just had to come up with the types of slogans that people would write on signs to hold at a wrestling match if they were to go, like stuff like that. It was just kind of like doing background props work, anything menial that the actual
is there some scenes where we can recognize your work?
I wouldn't call it my work, but yeah, there's, you know, there were certain things. Actually, it was kind of cool. One day my mom would watch all the episodes, even though she told me constantly how much she hated the show. But she would watch the episodes because I was working on them, and like one day, and I would try to remember what I had specifically done for each episode, because we filmed them quite a while before they would air, so it would be like, let me think back to what that one was and what I might have done for it. And one week, I told her a couple things that I'd done for an episode, and then she goes, oh, there was this chalkboard in it that the mom had, and I thought it looked like your handwriting, but then I thought, oh, it's probably not. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's my handwriting. I wrote the stuff on that chalkboard. I forgot, you know, which was kind of a cool moment, and I told that to my boss, and he said that he had a really similar moment early on the show where his mom recognized his handwriting on something. So yeah, there's little moments all throughout the episodes where like something will be there that I made. There was one episode where I just made clay into a vase-like shape because they were supposed to be, the mom was throwing it on a pottery wheel, but they don't actually have her do that, so we just had to make something that looked like it was like in the process of being done. And then I went down onto the stage later for something else, and they were shooting that scene, and so I was watching them film the part where like she has the little shitty pot I made between her hands on this pottery wheel that she's supposedly doing. So there's little things like that throughout the episodes that I'm like, cool, you know, I did that. But it's all very small stuff. But it was cool just to get to experience. That's the only time that I've been on a set of that size. We had 170 people on the crew. So to be in that type of environment where it's 170 people and the 7th season of the show, it's just like a machine at that point. Like the show runs itself. And so to get to see all of that working was really cool.
And the show is like continuously, like years after years, seasons after season, to have the same quality?
Yeah, I would say so. I never watched the show before I worked on it. It's a family show. Like my mom's friends all watch it. It's like that kind of demographic. So I never watched it, but until I started working on it, and then I watched the episodes, and like they're funny. I think it's a pretty decent show, and people like in my mom's friends type of group, a lot of them really love it. And that's why we've gotten 7 seasons, and I'm sure that they'll get an 8th season. I don't think that there's any real doubt about that. And it's like, I still think it's good. Schooled, to be honest, is not very good. That's the spinoff. But The Goldbergs is a solid show. The one cool thing about Schooled was that it stars AJ, I don't even know how to pronounce her last name, but it's AJ from Ally and AJ, which was this big Disney Channel like girl band when I was a little kid. And I'm in like this sweet spot age group where I walked on the set and was like, oh my god, it's AJ from Ally and AJ. And like anyone older or younger than me has no idea who she is. It was like a thing for a couple years right when I was at that Disney Channel age.
They released album.
Yeah, they were big Disney Channel girls when I was a kid.
Wow. Okay, never heard about them.
Yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't, but they were like one of the little like bands that Disney puts together, and then they had a movie called Cowbells, Disney Channel original movie. That was a big deal.
Okay.
But it's like, yeah, there's probably like a maximum 5-year.
And
AJ.
they are in that TV show?
AJ is.
Oh, just AJ.
Yeah, I don't know what Ally's up to, but AJ was like it's such a weird spin-off. In the Goldbergs, AJ plays the older brother's girlfriend who goes away after like season 5, I think, and then somehow she got her own spin-off show. Like that's the character that they choose to follow for an entire other series is the older brother's girlfriend.
She's in Silicon Valley.
Really?
In an episode of Silicon Valley.
They edited Silicon Valley in the same building that I worked at.
She was in Super 8.
Okay.
You know that movie?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I
know it. Ooh, sweet spots in my heart. Okay, so movie set designer in LA. You live from that. Self-entrepreneur in LA. And the question is, how did you get from movie set designer to teaching assistant?
Well, I mean, one of the best things about working in film and being self-employed is that I have no ties at all. Like, I make my own schedule, / my schedule makes me, because jobs just happen whenever they're going to happen. But I do have the luxury of saying, like, oh, I'm not going to work these days, and then I can, you know, as long as I have enough money to do so, I can say no to any jobs that come up on those days. Like, I take my own vacation, I make my own hours, whatever. And so to just leave for 6 months is plausible. And in college, I always wanted to study abroad, and I never did, because it was an option, but it didn't work very well with my major. So I chose not to, but I always wanted to get that experience of living someplace else, not just traveling someplace else. And I also wanted to improve my Spanish. Finally, I've been, you know, like learning little bits of Spanish for a really long time. The US is not great at teaching languages. And I was like, okay, I just want to go live someplace Spanish speaking for a little while, immerse myself in a different culture, finally learn the language. And I minored in teaching, or minored in education, in college, and have always really loved being in the classroom and working with kids and doing education. And this just really fell into my lap, that a friend of mine from school who is now living in New York texted me out of nowhere and was like, hey, I found out about this program. You go teach English in Spain, and it starts in January and it goes until the end of the school year. I'm going to do it. Do you want to do it with me? And my job at the Goldbergs ended up getting extended till March, and so I had to quit. But initially it was only going to last until January, or until Christmas. And then I didn't have anything on the calendar after that. I love teaching. I would be able to come live in Spain and get paid and not just be throwing all my money out the window for 6 months. And so I was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do it with you. And I went through the whole application process and everything and got accepted. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this, so you're doing it, right? And she was like, oh, no, actually, I decided I'm not gonna. And I was like, okay, cool.
Isn't it the best, actually? Isn't it the best outcome for you?
Well, it was great, because I was like, thank you for just handing this program to me that it was exactly the type of thing I was looking for and hadn't really been able to.
So yeah, you ended up going there alone.
Well, no. So then I was thinking and was like, do I want to do this alone, or do I want to see if someone else will come with me? And there are kind of pros and cons to both. And then finally I was like, well, I think it'll be easier. I really wanted to meet Spanish friends, and I was like, it'll be easier to meet people if I have someone else with me already, and versus just being like, hey, here I am, I speak Spanish kind of, will you please be my friend, you know?
Well, actually it's kind of better, I guess, but it's just my opinion. Well, it's really immersive.
Yeah, in some ways yes, and in some ways no, but
and you get to beat your, fright.
Yeah, well, and I wasn't afraid of it. I was just kind of thinking, what would I rather do? And there really were pros and cons to both. And so I thought, okay, I'll ask a couple people, and if nobody wants to go with me and I go alone, then that's fine. And I was thinking about who to ask, and I thought of my friend Alex, who has been my friend for many years in college, or for a couple years, but she's not like, she wasn't one of my closest friends, or one of, someone that I hung out with all the time. But for some reason, I was like, no, I think that this would be something that Alex would like. And I texted her, and she responded, like, immediately, and was like, I just got in a fight with my mom 2 days ago about how I want to move to Spain, and she didn't think that was a good idea, but I've decided that that's, like, my next goal in life, is that I want to go live in Spain. And you literally tell her that? Yeah, and she was the first person I texted, and she was like, yes, totally, I'll do it with you. And she did. And so we're here together. Where is Alex? She did not join me this weekend. She's in Madrid. But yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. I invited everyone. I texted her and also my other friends that we've made in Madrid and was like, hey, I booked this cheap flight. Anyone want to come? And nobody came, so I'm here alone. But
So we're gonna tease for you in the second episode. You will tell them story on how is the story with your friend and stuff. Okay, so yeah, that's the end, everyone. Thank you for listening to us and to the first episode of Welcome to the Center of the World. You can comment the episode on SoundCloud, YouTube. There will be an Instagram. There is an Instagram, I guess, so when I publish that. And don't hesitate to comment. Don't hesitate to say, oh, it was shitty for that, or I liked it for that. And if you have questions, because most probably in the next few weeks I will accumulate enough questions that there would be a section in the podcast. So yeah, thank you for listening to us. So it was Antoine and Katie tonight. See you next time. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. Comment and check us out on YouTube, SoundCloud, Facebook and Instagram. See you next time. I know that this reference will be dated in maybe 2 or 3 years, but are you dropping the bomb that the Spanish babies are the origin of the coronavirus?
They might be.
It's a joke. I went to the what was her name? What's the name of white dress girl?
Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. From the walk of shame. We're not gonna talk about that now, because I feel that we literally completely derailed that podcast. So we need to get back on the track.
I mean, woo.
Woo! Should we take some water?
Have a little drink.
I love me some Clint Eastwood. Oh my god, I love me some Clint Eastwood. But man, the guy is old.
Yeah, but that's what he loves to do. And Clint Eastwood's never gonna retire. He's just gonna die on set one day, and that's gonna be it, you know? But I don't think he would ever give it up.
He's yes, that stare. Yeah, he's really something.
My boyfriend in high school was Hmong, and most people in Wisconsin know Hmong people, know what that is, because we have a lot of Hmong people, but people in other places don't necessarily, or some older people don't necessarily. And he would always be like, like Gran Torino, that Clint Eastwood movie, those are Hmong people. He hated that movie.
Well, I mean, do you like that movie?
I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I don't think it's the most sensitive movie towards Hmong people.
Okay,
and it's also their only representation in film ever, I'm pretty sure.
Do you think it was too stereotypical?
Or
it's just that it's the only representation of it?
It's the only representation, and I genuinely don't remember it very well at all. I just remember watching it and being kind of this seems a little racist.
So I haven't seen it in a while, but from what I remember, it's a movie about Clint Eastwood being that old racist guy.
Asshole, yeah.
Well, I don't think he's racist. He's just just really raw and old, and that's it. And he knows that he's gonna die?
I don't remember.
So now he's just living his life and whatever. And there are those 2 teenagers that crashed at his place, or the brother does it or whatever. And there is some kind of friendship starting between them and Clint Eastwood. And can we spoil it?
Oh, yeah, we can spoil it. That's fine.
He ends up getting killed for nothing, just because he knew that the cops would show off and they would arrest the real bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a bad movie. I think it's really entertaining, and I like the raw attitude of Clint Eastwood in the way he expresses some issues,
Mm-hmm.
some racial issues that are current in the US. I don't even know, that's kind of funny story, but I don't even know if the Clint Eastwood from back in that time could do that movie now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that things even evolved a bit further in those issues.
Definitely.
And
we're kind of, I think in the US we're currently a little bit overboard with political correctness, but at the same time I would rather that than the alternative,
Yeah, that's true. You're totally right on that.
That's something I've noticed in Spain is like they're definitely a little bit more
raw.
Like, yeah, they say things openly that to me are racist more often than you hear in the US. Like, people will say that amongst themselves maybe, but no one's gonna say it to like a stranger. And in Spain, there are certain things that I'm like, oh, okay. I don't think that's super chill. And cool. That's what's made me be like, yeah, okay, I think that I'm okay with the US being a little bit overboard on that.
Okay. And the show is good?
Yeah.
Not okay, my question is oh my god, it's famous.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny.
Oh my goodness, my voice. I hadn't really been able to find.
Just to put you in the context, there is my cat here, and I'm petting him. He's purring so much, maybe we can even hear it. It's so cute.